Check. And very soon, mate.
The sprayer in my hands felt heavier than it should have. Maybe it was the weight of watching my life circle the drain, or maybe it was just the cheap equipment at Murphy's car wash. Either way, I was hosing down a Mercedes that cost more than I'd made in the last 6 months when she walked up. Marjorie Sellers, my former mother-in-law. Still perfectly coiffed at 72, still looking at me like I was something she'd scrape off her Louboutin heels. "Jack Crane," she said, her voice carrying that particular blend of disgust and amusement that rich people perfect over decades of looking down on everyone else. "You were always the weak one." I kept spraying the car, letting the water drown out my first 3 responses, all of which would have gotten me fired. "Mrs. Sellers, lovely to see you too. If you were any weaker, you'd be invisible," she continued, apparently not done with her daily dose of cruelty. "How's that for family spirit?" Actually, if I was any weaker, I'd be dead. But Marjorie had never been one for accuracy when cruelty was on the table. 6 months ago, I was Jack Crane, CEO of Crane Industries. I'd built that company from nothing, turned a failing auto parts business into a manufacturing empire worth hundreds of millions. I had a corner office on the 40th floor, a house in the hills, and a wife who used to look at me like I hung the moon. Now I was Jack Crane, car wash attendant, living in a studio apartment that smelled like the previous tenant's cats and regret. The transformation hadn't been gradual. In the corporate world, when they want you gone, they don't ease you out. They drop a guillotine, and if you're lucky, it's sharp enough to make it quick. My wife Lila had been the blade. Her father Edmund had been the executioner. "The board has lost confidence in your leadership," Edmund had said, sitting in what used to be my conference room, surrounded by people who used to laugh at my jokes and compete for invitations to my Christmas parties. "We think it's time for fresh blood." Fresh blood. That was one way to describe Travis Holt, the 36-year-old golden boy who'd been whispering in Edmund's ear for months. Travis with his MBA from Wharton and his smile that never quite reached his eyes. Travis, who'd been sleeping with my wife. I hadn't known about the affair then. That revelation came later, courtesy of a private investigator and a manila envelope full of photographs that made my morning coffee taste like battery acid. But I'm getting ahead of myself. "You know," Marjorie continued, examining her manicure while I worked, "Lila is so much happier now. She's finally with someone who appreciates her intelligence." Someone who appreciates her intelligence. Right, I'd seen the security footage. Travis appreciated her intelligence about as much as a dog appreciates quantum physics. "That's wonderful," I said, moving to the next car. "I'm sure they're very happy together." Marjorie's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "Oh, they are. Travis is everything you never were, Jack. Sophisticated, educated, from the right kind of family." The right kind of family. Code for old money, the kind that came from great-great-grandfathers who'd made their fortunes in railroads and steel, back when robbing people was considered entrepreneurship instead of crime. My family had made their money the hard way, by working for it. My father had been a mechanic, my mother a secretary. I'd put myself through state college on scholarships and student loans, worked nights at a factory to pay for business school. I'd built everything I had from nothing, and these people had treated it like a character flaw. "Well," I said, wringing out my rag, "I hope Travis knows what he's getting into." "Oh, he does. He's not naive like you were, Jack. He understands how business really works." How business really works. Meaning he understood that sometimes you have to stab people in the back to get what you want. Meaning he understood that loyalty was just a word people used when they needed something from you. Marjorie turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Jack, don't think about trying to cause trouble. You signed the papers. You have nothing left." She walked away, her heels clicking on the wet pavement like a countdown timer. I watched her climb into her Bentley and drive away, probably heading back to the country club to tell her friends about her encounter with the fallen king. I finished the Mercedes and moved on to a pickup truck, letting the familiar rhythm of spray and scrub calm my nerves. The work was mindless, which was both a blessing and a curse. It gave me too much time to think. The other guys at the car wash were decent enough. Most of them were like me, casualties of corporate downsizing or economic shifts that had left their skills obsolete. We didn't talk much about our previous lives. It was an unspoken rule, like not asking a war veteran about his nightmares. Murphy, the owner, was a former cop who'd taken early retirement after a shooting that left him with a limp and a settlement that was just enough to buy the car wash. He'd given me the job without asking too many questions, which I appreciated. "Crane," Murphy called from the office. "Got a customer wants to talk to you." I looked up, expecting another former colleague, ready to twist the knife. Instead, I saw Bill Henderson, who'd been on the board of directors at Crane Industries. Bill was one of the few who'd voted against my ouster, not that it had mattered. "Jack," he said, extending his hand. "How are you holding up?" "Living the dream, Bill. You know how it is." Bill looked uncomfortable, which was fair. What do you say to someone whose life you watched get destroyed in a boardroom? "Sorry about that seemed inadequate." "Listen, Jack, I wanted to talk to you about something important." I set down the spray tool and gave him my attention. Bill wasn't the type for small talk or social visits. "You remember the stock options you negotiated when you first took over as CEO? He said. Of course I remembered. It had been one of my few victories in the early days, when Edmund was still pretending to respect my business acumen. A percentage of company stock vested over 10 years, locked in at the original valuation. What about them? They're still valid, Jack. The board couldn't touch them without your signature, and you never signed them away." I stared at him. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you still own 12% of Crane Industries, and with the company's current valuation..." He pulled out his phone, showed me a number that made my vision blur. "You're looking at about $47 million. The spray tool slipped from my hand and clattered on the pavement. $47 million. I'd been washing cars for minimum wage while sitting on a fortune. Why didn't anyone tell me? Because they were hoping you'd never figure it out. Edmund's been trying to find a way around it for months, but the contract is ironclad. Those shares are yours, Jack. The question is, what are you going to do with them?" I looked around the car wash, at the grimy equipment and the oil-stained pavement, at the life I'd been living for the past 6 months. Then I looked back at Bill. "I'm going to make them remember why they should have been afraid of me in the first place." 3 weeks later, I was sitting in a conference room that still smelled like new leather and broken dreams. Bill had been busy during my absence from the corporate world, and apparently he'd been holding grudges longer than I'd realized. Henderson Industries is expanding, he'd told me over coffee at a diner that definitely wasn't the country club. "I've got 3 openings in my executive team. Pick one, and let's make them regret what they did to you." I'd chosen Director of Strategic Development, which was corporate speak for the guy who figures out how to destroy the competition. It seemed appropriate. My first day back in a suit felt like putting on armor. The fabric was expensive. I'd splurged on a tailor who understood that revenge required proper presentation. The shoes were Italian leather, the watch was Swiss precision, and the smile was pure American capitalism. The Crane Industries building looked smaller than I remembered. Funny how perspective changes when you're not looking up from the gutter. I had a legitimate reason to be there. Henderson Industries was considering a partnership with one of their suppliers, which gave me access to the building and a perfect excuse to do some reconnaissance. The lobby was exactly as I'd left it, all marble and brass and intimidation. The security guard was new, which was unfortunate. The old guard, Pete, would have recognized me and might have provided some useful gossip. This kid looked like he'd graduated from Mall Cop Academy last week. "Jack Crane to see Michael Torres in procurement," I told him, handing over my new business card. The kid checked his list, made a phone call, and handed me a visitor's badge. 32nd floor, elevators are to your right." I knew where the elevators were. I'd ridden them every day for 8 years. The ride-up was surreal. I'd made this trip thousands of times, but never as a visitor, never as an outsider looking in. The elevator music was the same, some inoffensive jazz that was designed to be forgotten the moment you heard it. Michael Torres was a good guy, one of the few middle managers who'd sent me a private message after my firing. He seemed genuinely happy to see me, which was more than I could say for most people these days. "Jack, man, it's good to see you. How are you doing?" "Better than expected, Mike. A lot better." We spent 20 minutes discussing the potential partnership, which was real enough to provide cover for my actual mission. Mike was professional, thorough, and completely unaware that I was using our meeting to gather intelligence on my former company. "How are things around here?" I asked casually as we wrapped up. Mike's expression darkened slightly. "Different. Travis is, well, he's not you." "How so?" "He's all flash, no substance. makes big pronouncements in meetings, but when it comes to actual execution, Mike shrugged. Let's just say morale isn't what it used to be. Interesting. I filed that information away for later use. And Lila, how's she adjusting to her new role? Mike looked uncomfortable. She's focused, very focused on the strategic direction of the company. Strategic direction. That was one way to describe sleeping with the CEO. Well, I said, standing up, I should let you get back to work. Thanks for taking the time to meet with me. Any time, Jack. And hey, if you ever want to grab a beer and catch up, just let me know. I promised I would, knowing I probably wouldn't. Mike was a good guy, but good guys had a tendency to get caught in the crossfire when war started. I took the long way back to the elevators, walking past my old office. The nameplate on the door now read, Travis Holt, Chief Executive Officer. Through the glass walls, I could see him on the phone, gesturing dramatically at someone who couldn't see him. His desk was positioned to face the door, a power play that screamed insecurity. The executive assistant was new too, young, blonde, and probably impressed by Travis's title and corner office. She looked up as I passed, and I gave her my most professional smile. Excuse me, I said, approaching her desk. I'm Jack Crane from Henderson Industries. I was supposed to drop off these documents for Mr. Holt, but it looks like he's busy. I handed her a manila envelope that contained nothing more than some Henderson Industries marketing materials, but she didn't know that. I can make sure he gets these, she said, taking the envelope. Perfect. And could you tell him that Jack Crane stopped by? He'll know what it's about. Her eyes widened slightly. Apparently, my name still carried some weight around here, even if it was mostly notoriety. I was halfway to the elevator when I heard a familiar voice behind me. Well, look what the cat dragged in. I turned around to see Travis Holt himself, standing in his office doorway with the manila envelope in his hand. He was smiling, but it was the kind of smile a shark might give a wounded seal. Travis, I said, extending my hand. You're looking well. Success suits you. He ignored my hand. What are you doing here, Jack? Business meeting with procurement. Henderson Industries is looking at some new suppliers. Henderson Industries. He said it like he was tasting something sour. Bill Henderson's little operation. I heard you were working for him now. Working with him, I corrected. It's been quite educational. Travis's smile faltered slightly. He wasn't sure if that was a threat or just conversation, which was exactly what I wanted. Well, he said, I'm sure you have important car washing to get back to. The comment was designed to wound, to remind me of how far I'd fallen. 6 months ago, it would have worked. Now it just made me smile. Actually, I've moved on from that. But I learned some valuable lessons during my time there. About resilience, about patience, about the importance of timing. Travis's expression shifted from smugness to uncertainty. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing at all, just making conversation. I pressed the elevator call button. Give my regards to Lila. I hope she's happy. The elevator arrived with a soft ding, and I stepped inside. As the doors closed, I saw Travis standing there with my envelope in his hand, looking like a man who'd just realized he might have made a mistake. The ride down gave me time to think. Travis was arrogant, which was useful. Arrogant people made mistakes. They underestimated their opponents and overestimated their own abilities. They left themselves vulnerable. But arrogance alone wouldn't be enough to bring him down. I needed leverage, and I needed allies. Most importantly, I needed information. I spent the rest of the afternoon in my new office, making phone calls and sending emails. Henderson Industries might not have been as large as Crane Industries, but Bill had connections throughout the industry. People who owed him favors, people who respected his opinion, people who remembered when business was conducted on handshakes instead of hostile takeovers. By 5 o'clock, I had the beginnings of a plan. The first phase was simple: surveillance. I needed to know Travis's routines, his weaknesses, his secrets. I needed to understand the dynamics within the company, who was loyal to whom, who was unhappy with the new regime. The second phase would be disruption. Small things at first, designed to create doubt and uncertainty. A missed delivery here, a scheduling conflict there, nothing that could be traced back to me, but enough to make Travis look incompetent. The third phase would be revelation. I had $47 million worth of leverage, but timing would be everything. I needed to wait for the right moment, when Travis was most vulnerable, and when my intervention would have maximum impact. In the final phase, well, that would depend on how badly they'd hurt me and how creative I felt like being. I was still working on the details when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but the voice was familiar. Jack, it's Pete Morrison. Pete had been the head of security at Crane Industries for 15 years before his retirement 6 months ago. He was also one of the few people who genuinely seemed sorry to see me go. Pete, how are you doing? Enjoying retirement. About as much as you can enjoy sitting around the house while your wife finds new projects for you. He chuckled, but there was something else in his voice. Listen, Jack, I heard through the grapevine that you might be interested in some information about your old company. What kind of information? The kind that might interest someone who's planning a comeback. I sat up straighter. I'm listening, not over the phone. You know Murphy's Bar on 5th Street? Meet me there in an hour. The line went dead, leaving me staring at my phone and wondering what Pete Morrison knew that was worth a clandestine meeting in a dive bar. I guess I was about to find out. Murphy's Bar was the kind of place where conversations died when strangers walked in, and everyone knew everyone else's business except their own. The lighting was dim, the beer was cheap, and the bartender looked like he'd seen everything twice and wasn't impressed either time. Pete was sitting in a corner booth, nursing a whiskey and looking like a man with secrets to sell. He'd put on weight since retirement, but his eyes were still sharp, still taking in everything around him. Jack, he said as I slid into the booth across from him, you look good. Better than the last time I saw you. Clean living and honest work, I said, signaling the bartender for a beer. Amazing what it can do for a man's complexion. Pete chuckled. Right, clean living. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. You want to know what's really going on at your old company? I'm always interested in industry news. Industry news. Pete shook his head. Jack, I've known you for 15 years. You're not here for industry news. You're here because you want your life back, and you're willing to do whatever it takes to get it. He wasn't wrong, but I wasn't about to admit it. What makes you think that? Because I know you. And because I know what they did to you wasn't just business. It was personal. The bartender brought my beer, and I took a long sip while I considered my response. Pete had been head of security for a reason. He was good at reading people, good at seeing the truth behind the facades. Okay, I said finally. Let's say you're right. Let's say I am interested in more than just industry news. What do you have? Pete reached into his jacket and pulled out a small digital recorder. 6 months of conversations, Jack. Board meetings, private discussions, phone calls. Everything you need to know about how they really run things now. I stared at the recorder. How did you get this? I still have friends in the building. People who remember when things were different, when the company actually cared about its employees instead of just its stock price. This is illegal, Pete. You know that, right? So was what they did to you. The difference is, nobody's going to prosecute them for it. He had a point. Corporate backstabbing might be morally reprehensible, but it wasn't criminal. What Pete was offering me, on the other hand, could land us both in prison. I can't take this, I said. You don't have to take it. You just have to listen to it. Pete pressed play on the recorder. The first voice I heard was Edmund Sellers, my former father-in-law, discussing the quarterly projections with someone I didn't recognize. The numbers look good, but we need to be careful about the narrative. If the press starts asking questions about the leadership transition, they won't, another voice interrupted. Travis. Jack's been effectively neutralized. He's washing cars for a living. Nobody's going to take anything he says seriously. Still, Edmund continued, we should be prepared for contingencies. Lila, what's your assessment? My wife's voice came through the speaker, cold and clinical. Jack was always more emotional than strategic. He'll make some noise, probably try to cause trouble, but he doesn't have the resources or the connections to be a real threat. And if he does try something, then we destroy him completely. Professionally, financially, personally. Whatever it takes. The recording continued for several more minutes, but I'd heard enough. They weren't just satisfied with having ruined my career. They were actively planning to finish the job if I showed any signs of recovery. Pete turned off the recorder. There's 6 hours of material like that, Jack. Board meetings where they laugh about what they did to you. Private conversations where they plan how to handle any potential problems you might cause. Phone calls with lawyers, accountants, PR consultants. What do you want for it? I don't want anything. This is a gift. Nobody gives away 6 hours of corporate espionage for free, Pete. What's your angle? Pete finished his whiskey and signaled for another. You remember my daughter Sarah? She was working in the accounting department when you were CEO. I remembered Sarah. Bright kid, fresh out of college, eager to prove herself. What about her? Travis fired her last month. Said the department was overstaffed, needed to cut costs. But 3 other people in that department had more seniority, less education, and lower performance reviews. So why did he fire Sarah? Because she asked questions about some discrepancies she'd found in the expense reports. Questions about Travis's travel budget, his entertainment expenses, his use of company resources for personal matters. I was starting to understand. And you think Travis fired her to keep her quiet? I think Travis fired her because she was getting close to something he didn't want discovered. And I think you're the only person with enough motivation and resources to find out what that something is. Pete slid the recorder across the table. Sarah's a good kid, Jack. She doesn't deserve to have her career destroyed because she was doing her job too well. I picked up the recorder, feeling its weight in my hand. It was small, probably held on a micro SD card, but it represented something much larger. It was leverage. It was ammunition. It was the key to everything I'd lost. There's one more thing, Pete said. Travis has been using the company's private investigator to dig into your background, looking for dirt, anything they can use to discredit you if you become a problem. What kind of dirt? Financial irregularities, personal relationships, family history, anything that might make you look bad in the press or in court. Have they found anything? Pete smiled. Not yet, but they're not looking in the right places. What do you mean? I mean, they're so focused on finding dirt on you that they're not paying attention to their own vulnerabilities. Travis thinks he's untouchable because he's got Edmund's backing and Lila's support. But he's making mistakes, Jack. Big ones. What kind of mistakes? The kind that end careers. The kind that destroy reputations. The kind that send people to prison. Pete finished his second whiskey and stood up. I've got to go. My wife thinks I'm at the hardware store, and if I'm not home in 20 minutes with a new garden hose, she's going to start asking questions I don't want her to answer. He put his hand on my shoulder. Be careful, Jack. These people destroyed you once. They won't hesitate to do it again if they feel threatened. I know. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're about to declare war on people who have more money, more connections, and fewer scruples than you do. Maybe. But they made one mistake, Pete. What's that? They left me alive. Pete studied my face for a long moment, then nodded. Good luck, Jack. You're going to need it. After he left, I sat in the booth for another hour, nursing my beer and thinking about what I'd just learned. The recorder felt heavy in my pocket, weighted with possibilities and dangers. 6 hours of conversations, 6 hours of evidence that the people who destroyed my life were not only unrepentant, but actively planning to finish the job. 6 hours of ammunition for a war I was already fighting, whether I'd officially declared it or not. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Saw you at the office today. We should talk. A friend. I stared at the message, wondering who had my number and what they wanted to discuss. In my experience, anonymous messages from friends were usually anything but friendly. But I was curious, and curiosity had always been one of my weaknesses. I typed back, when and where? The response came immediately. Tomorrow, noon. Riverside Park, south entrance. Come alone. Another mystery, another potential ally or enemy. My life was becoming more complicated by the day, but complicated was better than boring. Boring was washing cars and living in a studio apartment. Complicated was having options. I finished my beer and headed home, the recorder burning a hole in my pocket like a nuclear weapon waiting to be deployed. Tomorrow, I would meet my mysterious friend and see what other secrets were hiding in the shadows of my former life. But tonight, I had 6 hours of recordings to review and a war to plan. Riverside Park at noon was exactly the kind of place you'd choose for a clandestine meeting if you'd learned everything you knew about espionage from watching movies. Lots of open space, multiple exit routes, and enough ambient noise from traffic and pedestrians to mask a conversation. I arrived 15 minutes early and found a bench near the south entrance where I could watch the approaching paths. Old habits from my corporate days. Never walk into a meeting blind, always know who's in the room before you sit down. At exactly noon, I saw her walking toward me, and my blood pressure spiked. Fiona Marks, Lila's best friend since college, maid of honor at our wedding, and the one person I'd trusted almost as much as my wife. She was also the former CFO of a subsidiary company who'd been quietly let go 3 years ago after some irregularities in the books. "Hello, Jack," she said, sitting down beside me without invitation. "You look surprised to see me." "That's one word for it. What do you want, Fiona?" "To help you destroy them." I turned to study her face. Fiona had always been good at hiding her emotions, but there was something different about her now. Harder, more focused. "Why would you want to do that?" "Because they destroyed me first." She opened her purse and pulled out a tablet, swiping to a series of financial documents. "Do you remember when I was fired from Meridian Holdings?" Meridian was one of Crane Industries' subsidiary companies, specializing in automotive electronics. Fiona had been their CFO for 2 years before her sudden departure. "I remember you left to pursue other opportunities." "I was fired, Jack. Accused of embezzling company funds, forced to sign a non-disclosure agreement to avoid prosecution, and blacklisted from every major corporation in the industry." "Were you embezzling?" Fiona's laugh was bitter. "That's the beautiful part. I was actually investigating embezzlement. Someone was skimming money from the Meridian accounts, moving it through shell companies, making it disappear. I spent months tracking the paper trail, building a case." "What did you find?" "I found that the someone was Travis Holt, and when I brought my evidence to Edmund Sellers, he accused me of being the thief and had me fired within 24 hours. She swiped to another document, a bank statement showing a series of transfers. "Travis has been stealing from the company for years, Jack. Small amounts at first, but getting bolder. He's got accounts in 3 different countries, shell companies registered in Delaware and Nevada, and a very sophisticated system for moving money around." I studied the documents, recognizing the account numbers and transaction patterns. "How much are we talking about?" "Conservatively, about $12 million over the past 4 years. But that's just what I could track before they shut me down." $12 million. It was enough to ruin careers, destroy reputations, and send people to prison for a very long time. "Why didn't you go to the FBI? With what evidence?" "They made sure all the documentation pointed to me. As far as anyone knows, I'm the one who stole the money. Travis covered his tracks well, and Edmund made sure I couldn't prove otherwise." "So what's changed?" Fiona smiled, and for the first time since she'd sat down, she looked genuinely happy. "What's changed is that Travis got greedy and careless, and he made the mistake of thinking I was completely neutralized." She swiped to a new set of documents. "I've been watching him for 3 years, Jack. Following the money, tracking his movements, documenting everything, and last month, he made a mistake. The document on the screen was a wire transfer authorization for $2 million sent from a Crane Industries account to a bank in the Cayman Islands. The authorization signature was Travis's, and the transaction was dated just 2 weeks ago." "He's accelerating the timeline," Fiona explained, "moving larger amounts, taking bigger risks. I think he's planning to disappear soon, maybe after he's extracted everything he can from the company. Or maybe he's planning to pin it all on someone else and walk away clean. Maybe, but either way, he's vulnerable now. The transactions are getting large enough to trigger federal reporting requirements, and he's leaving a paper trail that even Edmund can't cover up." I handed the tablet back to her. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to help me expose him. You've got credibility in the industry, connections that I don't have anymore. More importantly, you've got motivation. What's in it for you? Vindication, justice, the satisfaction of watching Travis Holt get what he deserves." She paused. "And maybe a chance to get my life back." I considered her offer. Fiona was smart, thorough, and had every reason to want revenge against the people who'd destroyed her career. But she also had every reason to lie to me, to use me as a weapon in her own personal war. "How do I know you're telling the truth?" "Because I'm going to give you something that proves it." She reached into her purse again and pulled out a small USB drive. Financial records, bank statements, transaction logs, email correspondence, everything I've collected over the past 3 years. "Why give this to me? Why not use it yourself?" "Because I'm a disgraced former CFO with a reputation for embezzlement. You're Jack Crane, the man who built Crane Industries from nothing. People will listen to you in ways they'll never listen to me." She stood up, straightening her coat. "Think about it, Jack. But don't think too long. Travis is moving fast, and once he disappears with the money, we'll never get another chance. How do I contact you?" "You don't. I'll contact you." She started to walk away, then turned back. Oh, and Jack, be careful who you trust. This conspiracy goes deeper than you think, and not everyone who claims to be your friend actually is. I watched her disappear into the crowd of pedestrians, leaving me alone, with a USB drive full of potentially explosive information and more questions than answers. That evening, I sat in my apartment with my laptop, reviewing both Pete's recordings and Fiona's financial documents. The picture that emerged was uglier than I'd imagined. Travis wasn't just an opportunistic embezzler. He was part of a systematic effort to loot Crane Industries from the inside. The recordings revealed conversations about moving assets, restructuring subsidiaries, and preparing for what Edmund called strategic repositioning. They were planning to strip the company of everything valuable, sell off the pieces, and walk away with hundreds of millions of dollars. My firing hadn't just been about removing an obstacle, it had been about eliminating the one person who might have been able to stop them. But they'd made one crucial error in their calculations. They'd assumed I would disappear quietly, that I would accept my defeat and fade away into obscurity. They'd underestimated my capacity for patience, my willingness to wait for the right moment to strike back. They were about to learn how wrong they'd been. I picked up my phone and dialed Bill Henderson's number. Bill, it's Jack. I need to ask you a favor, a big one. What do you need? I need you to help me buy a company. Which company? Crane Industries. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Jack, are you sure you know what you're doing? I'm sure. The question is, are you willing to help me do it? Another pause. What do you need from me? Access to your investment network, connections with private equity firms, and most importantly, absolute discretion. You've got it. But, Jack, yeah? When this is over, I want the whole story. Everything. When this is over, Bill, the whole story is going to be front-page news. I hung up the phone and opened my laptop, beginning to draft the first phase of what would either be the greatest comeback in corporate history or the most spectacular failure of my career. Either way, it was going to be interesting. The Henderson Industries conference room had been transformed into a war room, whiteboards covered with financial projections, laptops displaying real-time stock prices, and enough coffee to keep a small army awake for a week. Bill had assembled a team of financial analysts, lawyers, and investment specialists. People he trusted, people who understood that what we were planning required both skill and absolute secrecy. Crane Industries is vulnerable, explained Sarah Chen, Bill's head of mergers and acquisitions. Their stock price has been declining for 6 months. They've lost 3 major clients, and there are rumors of internal management conflicts. What kind of rumors? I asked. The usual corporate drama, disagreements about strategic direction, personality conflicts between executives, questions about leadership competence. Sarah pulled up a chart showing Crane Industries' stock performance. The market is losing confidence, which creates opportunities for hostile acquisition. How hostile are we talking? That depends on how much resistance they put up. If they're smart, they'll negotiate. If they're stubborn, Sarah shrugged, we have enough financial backing to force the issue. Bill had been busy during the past week, calling in favors and making connections. 3 private equity firms were interested in backing the acquisition, and a 4th was considering it. Combined with my own $47 million in stock, we had enough capital to make a serious bid. There's one potential problem, said Marcus Webb, Bill's corporate attorney. If they suspect you're behind the acquisition attempt, they'll fight it with everything they have. Edmund Sellers has enough connections to make things very difficult for us. So we don't let them know I'm involved until it's too late to stop us. How do we do that? I smiled. We use a stalking horse. The stalking horse strategy was simple but effective. Henderson Industries would make the initial acquisition offer with backing from anonymous investors. By the time Crane Industries figured out who was really behind the bid, the deal would be too far along to stop. It's risky, Marcus warned. If they discover your involvement early, they could claim the acquisition is motivated by personal vendetta rather than legitimate business interests. Let them claim whatever they want. By the time they figure it out, I'll own their company. Over the next 2 weeks, we moved carefully and quietly. Henderson Industries began acquiring small blocks of Crane Industries stock through intermediary brokers. Nothing large enough to trigger disclosure requirements, but enough to establish a position. Meanwhile, I used Pete's recordings and Fiona's financial documents to build a comprehensive picture of the company's vulnerabilities. Travis's embezzlement was just the beginning. There were questionable contracts, inflated expenses, and accounting irregularities that would make any potential investor very nervous. The beauty of the plan was its simplicity. We didn't need to prove criminal activity or file lawsuits. We just needed to create enough doubt about the company's financial stability to justify a hostile takeover. The preliminary offer is ready, Sarah announced during our morning briefing. $42 per share, all cash, with a 30-day acceptance period. The current stock price was $38 per share, so our offer represented a 10% premium, enough to get shareholders' attention, but not so much that it would seem desperate. When do we make the offer? This afternoon. I've scheduled a conference call with their board of directors for 3 o'clock. I looked around the room at the team Bill had assembled. These were professionals who made their living buying and selling companies, people who understood that business was war, conducted by other means. Any final questions or concerns? Just one, said Marcus. What happens after we own the company? What's your long-term strategy? It was a fair question. Hostile takeovers were expensive, complicated, and time-consuming. Most people didn't attempt them unless they had a clear plan for making money afterward. My long-term strategy is simple, I said. I'm going to fire everyone who betrayed me, prosecute everyone who stole from me, and then I'm going to rebuild the company the right way. That's not a business plan, Jack. That's a revenge fantasy. Sometimes they're the same thing. At exactly 3 o'clock, Sarah placed the conference call to Crane Industries. The board of directors was expecting a routine discussion about a potential partnership. Instead, they got a formal acquisition offer that would change everything. I listened to the call from Bill's office, hearing the shocked silence when Sarah announced Henderson Industries' intention to purchase Crane Industries for $42 per share. Edmund Sellers was the first to recover. This is highly irregular. We haven't had any preliminary discussions about a potential acquisition. That's correct, Sarah replied smoothly. This is an unsolicited offer, but we believe it represents fair value for your shareholders. Who's behind this? Travis's voice was tight with barely controlled anger. Henderson Industries doesn't have the capital for an acquisition of this size. We have backing from a consortium of private investors who prefer to remain anonymous at this time. This is ridiculous, Lila interjected. Our company isn't for sale. Every company is for sale at the right price, Mrs. Crane. The question is whether your board will act in the best interests of your shareholders. The call continued for another 20 minutes, with Sarah fielding questions and deflecting attempts to identify the mysterious investors. By the end, it was clear that Crane Industries' board was rattled but not ready to surrender. They'll fight it, Bill predicted after Sarah hung up. Good. Fighting will make them look desperate, and desperate companies attract attention from regulators and journalists. You're enjoying this, aren't you? More than I should, probably, but after 6 months of washing cars and listening to people tell me I was weak, I have to admit it feels good to be back in the game. My phone rang, displaying a number I didn't recognize. I answered it cautiously. Jack Crane. Mr. Crane, this is Jennifer Walsh from the Financial Tribune. I'm calling about the Henderson Industries acquisition offer for Crane Industries. Do you have any comment? News traveled fast in the financial world. The acquisition offer had been announced less than 4 hours ago, and already the business press was asking questions. I'm sorry, but I'm not involved in that transaction. You should speak with Henderson Industries directly. But you do have a history with Crane Industries, don't you? You were CEO until about 6 months ago? That's correct, but I'm not involved in the current acquisition discussions. Sources tell me that you still own a significant stake in the company. Is that accurate? I hesitated. Jennifer Walsh was a good reporter, thorough and well-connected. If she was asking questions, it meant someone had given her information. I can't comment on my personal investments. Of course, but if you were still a shareholder, you'd presumably have an opinion about whether the Henderson Industries offer is fair to investors. It was a clever question designed to get me talking without directly admitting my involvement. I think any shareholder would want the board to carefully consider all offers that might benefit the company's investors. Thank you for your time, Mr. Crane. After I hung up, Bill looked concerned. If reporters are already asking questions about your involvement, it won't be long before Edmund and Travis figure out what's really happening. Then we better move fast. That evening, I received another anonymous text message. They know. Meeting tomorrow. Same place, same time. Come alone. Fiona again, presumably with more information about how Crane Industries was responding to the acquisition threat. I was beginning to understand that she had sources inside the company, people who were keeping her informed about internal discussions. The next day at Riverside Park, she looked worried. "They're panicking," she said without preamble. "Emergency board meetings, conference calls with lawyers, discussions about defensive strategies." What kind of defensive strategies? Poison pills, white knight investors, asset sales, anything to make the company less attractive to potential acquirers. She handed me another USB drive. "But they're also accelerating their timeline for looting the company." "What do you mean?" "Travis authorized 3 major asset transfers yesterday. Shell companies in Nevada, bank accounts in Switzerland, enough money to disappear permanently if things get too hot." I took the USB drive, feeling its weight. "How much money are we talking about?" $23 million in the past 48 hours. At this rate, there won't be anything left to acquire. The situation was escalating faster than I'd anticipated. Travis wasn't just stealing money. He was preparing to destroy the company rather than let me reclaim it. "There's something else," Fiona continued. "They know you're behind the acquisition attempt." "How?" "Someone leaked it. I don't know who, but Edmund received a call yesterday afternoon with detailed information about your involvement with Henderson Industries." A leak. Someone on our team or someone with access to our planning had betrayed us. It was a complication I should have anticipated but hadn't. "What's their response?" "They're going nuclear. Press releases about your vindictive acquisition attempt, legal challenges to your stock ownership, private investigators digging into your personal life. They're going to try to destroy your reputation before you can destroy theirs." I stood up, pacing along the park path while I thought. The situation was spiraling out of control, but that wasn't necessarily bad. Desperate people made mistakes, and mistakes created opportunities. "Fiona, I need you to do something for me." "What?" "I need you to arrange a meeting. All of them. Edmund, Travis, Lila, the whole board if necessary." "That's impossible. They'd never agree to meet with you." "They will if you tell them I'm willing to negotiate." "Are you?" I smiled. "Not exactly. But they don't need to know that until it's too late." Character count check. Approximately 45,000 characters. The Riverside Hotel's executive conference room was neutral territory, expensive enough to satisfy Edmund's sense of status, but public enough to prevent anyone from doing anything too dramatic. I arrived 15 minutes early, choosing a seat at the head of the table where I could see everyone as they entered. Edmund came first, looking older than I remembered, followed by Travis, who couldn't hide his nervousness behind his expensive suit. Lila entered with 2 lawyers I didn't recognize, her expression cold and professional. The rest of the board filed in behind them. People I'd worked with for years, people who'd smiled at my jokes and competed for my approval. "Jack," Edmund said, taking a seat across from me. "You look well." "Thank you. Success agrees with me." Travis snorted. "Success? You're trying to steal a company you already failed to run properly." I prefer to think of it as correcting a mistake. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. These people had destroyed my life, and now they were facing the possibility that I might return the favor. "Let's get to the point," said Margaret Foster, the board's lead independent director. "We understand you're behind the Henderson Industries acquisition offer." "That's correct." "We're prepared to make you a counteroffer for your shares," Edmund said. $50 per share, cash, immediate settlement. $50 per share would net me about $60 million, more money than I'd ever imagined having. 6 months ago, I would have jumped at the offer. "That's generous," I said, "but I'm not interested in selling." "Then what do you want?" Lila asked. "I want my company back." "It was never your company, Jack," Travis said. "You were an employee, nothing more." "Was I?" "Because the way I remember it, I built Crane Industries from a failing auto parts business into a manufacturing empire. I recruited the talent, developed the strategies, negotiated the deals that made this company successful, and then you failed," Edmund said. "The board lost confidence in your leadership, and we made a change. That's business." "No, that's theft. You stole my company, destroyed my reputation, and tried to erase everything I'd built." I stood up, walking to the window that overlooked the city. "But you made one mistake." "What's that?" Travis asked. "You left me alive to do something about it." I turned back to face the table, pulling out a tablet and connecting it to the room's presentation system. "I want to show you something." The first document that appeared on the screen was a bank statement showing a wire transfer for $2 million from a Crane Industries account to a shell company in the Cayman Islands. The authorization signature was clearly visible. Travis Holt. Travis went pale. Where did you get that? The same place I got these? I clicked through a series of financial documents, each one showing another unauthorized transfer, another theft from company accounts. $12 million over 4 years, Travis. That's a lot of money, even by your standards. Those documents are fabricated, Edmund said, but his voice lacked conviction. Are they? Because I have bank records, email correspondence, and recorded phone conversations that tell a very different story. I clicked to an audio file, filling the room with Travis's voice discussing the movement of funds to offshore accounts. The silence that followed was deafening. Edmund stared at the screen, his face ashen. The board members looked back and forth between Travis and the evidence, understanding dawning in their expressions. This is entrapment, one of the lawyers said. These recordings were obtained illegally. Actually, they weren't. But even if they were, that wouldn't change what they reveal about your client's criminal activity. Travis stood up abruptly. I don't have to listen to this. Sit down, Travis, Edmund said quietly. We need to hear what Jack has to say. What I have to say is simple. Travis has been stealing from the company for years, with or without your knowledge. The evidence is overwhelming, and it's going to become public very soon. What do you want? Lila asked. I want Travis to resign immediately, effective today. I want him to repay every dollar he's stolen, with interest. And I want him to sign a full confession detailing his criminal activity. And if he does that, then maybe the authorities will go easy on him when he's prosecuted for embezzlement. Travis finally found his voice. You can't prove anything. Those recordings are inadmissible, and the financial documents can be explained. Can they? Because I also have this. I clicked to a new document, a comprehensive forensic accounting report prepared by one of the city's most respected investigative firms. 18 months of analysis, Travis. Every transaction, every transfer, every attempt to hide the money trail. The report was devastating, laying out the full scope of Travis's theft in meticulous detail. Shell companies, offshore accounts, forged authorizations, and everything documented with the kind of precision that would make prosecutors salivate. How did you get access to our financial records? Margaret asked. I didn't need access. I still own 12% of this company, which gives me certain rights as a shareholder, including the right to request independent audits when I suspect financial irregularities. It was a lie, but a convincing one. The forensic accounting report was real. Bill Henderson had commissioned it using publicly available information and educated guesswork. But it was thorough enough to pass casual scrutiny. This is blackmail, Travis said. No, this is justice. Blackmail would be if I offered to keep this information secret in exchange for something. I'm not making that offer. What are you saying? I'm saying that tomorrow morning, copies of this report are going to the FBI, the SEC, the IRS, and every major financial news organization in the country. Travis Holt is going to be famous, just not in the way he hoped. The room erupted in chaos. Travis started shouting about fabricated evidence and personal vendettas. Edmund demanded to know how I'd obtained confidential information. The lawyers huddled together, whispering about damage control and legal strategies. Through it all, Lila sat quietly, staring at the evidence on the screen with an expression I couldn't read. Finally, Edmund called for order. Jack, what would it take for you to reconsider releasing this information? Nothing. The information is going public regardless. The only question is whether Travis cooperates with the investigation or forces prosecutors to build their case the hard way. You're destroying the company, Margaret said. If this scandal breaks, our stock price will collapse, our clients will flee, and hundreds of people will lose their jobs. The company is already being destroyed, just more slowly and quietly. At least my way, there's a chance to rebuild something honest from the wreckage. I disconnected my tablet from the presentation system and headed for the door. You have 24 hours to decide how you want to handle this. After that, the decision will be made for you. Jack, wait, Lila called. I turned back to look at my ex-wife, the woman who'd shared my bed and my dreams before she'd shared my destruction. This won't bring back what we had, she said. No, it won't. But it will make sure that what we had meant something. I left them in the conference room, arguing among themselves about damage control and exit strategies. By the time they figured out their next move, it would be too late to stop what was coming. The war was almost over, and I was finally winning. The story broke at exactly 6 o'clock the next morning, simultaneously across 3 major financial news networks and 4 national newspapers. The headlines were everything I'd hoped for. CEO accused of massive embezzlement, Crane Industries stock plunges on fraud allegations, family dynasty crumbles amid scandal. I watched the coverage from Bill Henderson's office, drinking coffee and feeling something I hadn't experienced in months: satisfaction. The FBI has confirmed they're opening an investigation, Sarah reported, monitoring news feeds on her laptop. The SEC is reviewing trading activity for the past 2 years, and Crane Industries stock has dropped 30% in pre-market trading. My phone had been ringing constantly since the story broke. Reporters wanting comments, former colleagues seeking gossip, lawyers offering their services. I'd ignored them all, letting the story speak for itself. "There's something else," Bill said, handing me a printed email. This came through our corporate account an hour ago. The message was from Edmund Sellers, brief and to the point. "We need to talk. Today." "Are you going to respond?" Sarah asked. "Oh, I'm going to do more than respond. I'm going to end this." The meeting was set for 2 o'clock at Edmund's private club, a bastion of old money and older prejudices, where I'd never been welcome, even when I was married to his daughter. The irony wasn't lost on me that our final confrontation would take place in the same building where I'd been snubbed and dismissed for years. Edmund was waiting in a private dining room, looking every one of his 74 years. The scandal had aged him overnight, turning his silver hair gray and adding lines to his face that hadn't been there a week ago. "Jack," he said, standing as I entered. "Thank you for coming." "Edmund, you look terrible." "I feel worse." He gestured to a chair across from him. "We need to discuss terms." "What terms?" "Travis is finished, your company is collapsing, and your family's reputation is in ruins. What exactly do you think we have to negotiate?" "The future of Crane Industries, and the future of everyone who works there." I sat down, curious despite myself. "I'm listening. The board met in an emergency session this morning. Travis has been terminated, effective immediately. We're also prepared to accept your acquisition offer." My offer was $42 per share. Your stock is now trading at $26 per share. "I think I'll wait and see how much lower it goes." Edmund winced. "Jack, there are 800 people who work for Crane Industries. Good people who had nothing to do with what happened to you. If the company fails, they'll all lose their jobs. Maybe they should have thought about that before they stood by and watched you destroy me." They didn't know what was happening. Hell, I didn't know what Travis was doing until you showed me that evidence yesterday. "Didn't you?" "Because I have recordings of board meetings where you discussed moving assets and restructuring subsidiaries. It sounds like you knew exactly what was happening." Edmund's shoulders sagged. "You're right, I knew Travis was aggressive, maybe too aggressive, but I thought he was just maximizing shareholder value, not stealing from the company." "And you thought destroying me was just business as usual?" "I thought you were a threat to the company's future. You were too emotional, too attached to the old ways of doing business. The board wanted someone who could make the hard decisions." "Like stealing $12 million? Like cutting costs, streamlining operations, maximizing efficiency? We never imagined—" He trailed off, staring out the window at the city below. "You never imagined that your golden boy was a thief. You never imagined that your brilliant strategy was actually a cover for embezzlement. You never imagined that the man you trusted to replace me was everything you accused me of being, and worse." "No, we didn't." I leaned back in my chair, studying the man who'd been my father-in-law for 10 years and my enemy for the past 6 months. He looked broken, defeated, and for the first time since this war began, I felt something that might have been pity. "What exactly are you proposing, Edmund? Full cooperation with the federal investigation? Complete transparency about company finances? And a negotiated sale of Crane Industries to Henderson Industries at a fair price? Define fair. $30 per share. $22 per share, and you're lucky to get that much." Edmund flinched. "Jack, at that price, the shareholders will lose everything. The shareholders should have been more careful about who they trusted to run their company, including you. It was a fair point. I still owned 12% of Crane Industries, which meant I would be taking a significant loss on my own investment. But some things were more important than money, including me. Sometimes the cost of justice is higher than the cost of injustice, but that doesn't make it less necessary. Edmund was quiet for a long moment, considering his options. Finally, he nodded. $22 per share. But I want your word that you'll do everything possible to preserve jobs. I can't promise to keep everyone, but I'll do my best to minimize layoffs. The company has good people. They just had terrible leadership. And Lila? What about her? She's still my daughter, Jack. Whatever happened between you two, she doesn't deserve to have her life destroyed. I thought about my ex-wife, the woman who'd betrayed me as completely as anyone ever had. She'd participated in my destruction, benefited from my downfall, and shown no remorse for what she'd done. Lila made her choices, Edmund. Now she has to live with the consequences. She loved you once, but not enough to keep her from sleeping with Travis, and not enough to keep her from voting to fire me. I stood up, straightening my jacket. I'll have my lawyers draw up the acquisition papers. You'll have them by tomorrow morning. Jack, wait! Edmund's voice stopped me at the door. For what it's worth, I'm sorry about everything. I turned back to look at him one last time. No, you're not. You're sorry you got caught, sorry your plan failed, sorry you're facing the consequences of your actions, but you're not sorry about what you did to me. You're wrong. Am I? Because if you were really sorry, you would have called me 6 months ago when you realized Travis was stealing from the company. You would have admitted your mistake and asked for my help fixing it. Instead, you waited until you had no other choice. I opened the door, then paused. But you know what, Edmund? It doesn't matter whether you're sorry or not, because I got my life back and you lost everything you thought was important. That's justice enough for me. The acquisition of Crane Industries was completed 3 weeks later. The FBI investigation resulted in criminal charges against Travis Holt, who eventually pleaded guilty to embezzlement and was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. The money he'd stolen was never fully recovered. Lila moved to California, where she took a mid-level position with a tech company that apparently didn't care about her association with the scandal. We never spoke again. Edmund retired from business entirely, selling his remaining investments and moving to a small town in Vermont where nobody knew his name or his history. As for me, I kept my promise to preserve as many jobs as possible. Most of the Crane Industries employees were retained, though in different roles and with new leadership. The company was restructured, renamed, and eventually became profitable again. But the real victory wasn't financial, it was personal. I had proven that weakness wasn't permanent, that defeat wasn't final, and that sometimes the best revenge was simply refusing to stay down when life knocked you over. 6 months after the acquisition was completed, I was back in my corner office, looking out at the city that had watched my fall and my rise. My assistant buzzed the intercom to announce my next appointment. "Send them in," I said. The door opened, and Pete Morrison walked in, wearing a suit instead of his usual casual clothes. "Pete, what are you doing here?" "I'm here for my job interview," he said with a grin. "I hear you need a new head of security. The position is yours if you want it. But I have to ask, why would you want to work for me again?" "Because you're the only CEO I know who actually gives a damn about doing the right thing, even when it costs you something." I offered him the chair across from my desk, the same chair where Travis Holt used to sit and plot my destruction. "Welcome back, Pete. Let's make sure this company never forgets what happens when good people stay silent while bad people take control." "Yes, sir. It'll be my pleasure." As Pete left to begin his new job, I turned back to the window and the city beyond. The view was exactly the same as it had been 2 years ago, but everything else had changed. I'd learned that power without principle was worthless, that success without integrity was hollow, and that sometimes you had to lose everything to discover what really mattered. I'd also learned that the best revenge wasn't destroying your enemies. It was building something better than what they'd tried to tear down. The intercom buzzed again, and "Mr. Crane, your 3 o'clock appointment is here. Send them in." The door opened, and Sarah Morrison, Pete's daughter, the accountant who'd been fired for asking inconvenient questions, walked in with a resume in her hand and determination in her eyes. "Mr. Crane, I'm here about the CFO position." I smiled, remembering the young woman who'd been brave enough to challenge corruption even when it cost her everything. The job is yours, Sarah. Welcome to the new Crane Industries. As she sat down to discuss her new role, I realized that this was how you really won a war. Not by destroying your enemies, but by building something they could never corrupt, never steal, and never destroy. I'd gotten my company back, but more importantly, I'd gotten my integrity back. And that was worth more than all the money Travis Holt had stolen, all the power Edmund Sellers had wielded, and all the love Lila had withdrawn. I was Jack Crane again, and this time I was going to do things right.